Hello, everybody. This is June 25th, 2020. This is going to our residents, to our loved ones, to the family members. I think it's been about 2 or 3 weeks since my last recording, and I just simply wanted to bring you up to date. I'd like to talk about three primary things. I want to talk, first of all, about where we are in terms of the pandemic at this juncture. Number two, what we know and what we've learned. And then number three, some specific protocols that are relevant to Tuscan Gardens, of course, and other senior living communities in the state of Florida. First of all, where are we? Well, I know that you read the same newspapers that I do, listen to the same news reports as I do, and as you know, Florida is one of the four primary epicenter states right now: California, Texas, Arizona, and Florida. We are now up to 110,000 cases. I think it'll be 115,000 by tomorrow. They're going up anywhere from 4,000 to 5,000 a day. I think yesterday was 5,400 from yesterday. And the reason for that, I mean, some people say there's a certain amount of testing, but we know based on hospitalizations that it's more than testing. What happened is the state opened up. And when the state opened up and they didn't have protocols in place or just left them to local governments, you ended up having businesses whose shops were opened having to ultimately police their own establishment. So you had customers who didn't want to wear masks and came in. You had employees, some of whom wore masks, others did not. And as a result of that, you had restaurants and shops and stores that exposed individuals to any number of potential risks associated with COVID-19. It's relevant because we do know quite a bit more today than we knew back in March when all of this started for most of us, maybe late February and early March. And that is that we do know that masks work. We know that by putting a mask on yourself and by other people putting masks on themselves, it actually works. We also know that social distancing works because it actually takes you kind of out of the line of fire, if you will. Why? Well, because the good news is the virus can only be transmitted through the respiratory system, and that can only come through droplets. Droplets go either in the mouth, the nose, or in your eyes. I say it's in a sense good news. It's bad news, but it's good news because it doesn't transfer in any other way. It doesn't go into pores, and it doesn't get infected in any other way. It doesn't go in your ears. So by having a mask and by socially distancing, you keep yourself in a much better position. In addition to that, we also know substantially that interior spaces create greater susceptibility to COVID than exterior spaces. So you have so many bicyclists around right now and people who are running and walking and getting air and certainly not exposing themselves to any large extent to COVID. But when you're in confined spaces, whether it's a shop or candidly even worse, a restaurant where you're sitting there for an hour and the actual the customer doesn't have a mask on, that is a particularly dangerous place, if you will, with respect to the transmittal of that virus. I say all that to you because the truth of the matter is we do know a great deal about how to protect ourselves, and we also know what the protocols are, which would in fact protect us. And that's what's really happening throughout senior living communities in the state of Florida right now. We're looking to make sure that we have instituted those protocols that will protect both the residents and the associates in that regard. So think about it from the standpoint of what's the first and foremost: sheltering in suite. You know that we've sheltered in suite. Why is that important? Well, because we know that a resident is going to be protected when they're sheltering in suite. We also know that when somebody enters in from the outside, it's important that both of them wear a mask. So we know that our associates, for example, wear a mask. And when our associate wears the mask going in and the resident then wears a mask, it protects both of them. And I know that that can be a subject of irritation for some residents and certainly some of the family members of our residents, but think about it. If the resident has not been out of the community, then get it. excuse me, I get it, and I understand that they may not have to wear that mask. But what if that resident has been out of the community and they have been exposed out of the community? We're very careful inside the community, but the reality is not everybody out there is as careful. So when they come back in, it's appropriate for that resident, as inconvenient as it is, to be wearing a mask when they're inside their suite and the associate comes in. Secondly, we specifically do have as a protocol indicate that the resident should not leave except for absolute essential medical services. And what that means is a medical service that cannot be handled through telemedicine. If you can do a Zoom call, and if you can otherwise be protected on the other side of a monitor with a FaceTime, for example, why would you want to expose yourself out? Or on the other side, we have transportation. So we will take you to the doctor. So we have family members who will say to us, yeah, but what's wrong with me picking up my mother or picking up my father and bringing them to the doctor? Well, two things. Number one, why? Because they're now being exposed to you. Also, number two, where's the doctor's office? If the doctor's office is at a hospital, as happened in a situation recently, then there's the opportunity for that person to be exposed there. Worse yet, what happens why can't I take my mother or my father for a day trip? My goodness, even worse. Because now you have a resident coming back in with a shopping bag. What's that suggesting? It's suggesting that he or she were in a shop and exposed to shopkeepers that may or may not be wearing masks, customers that may or may not be wearing masks, and in particularly confined spaces. I say these to you because these are all relevant to incidences as minor as they might be at Tuscan Gardens, in that situation or in other senior living communities, but a real rationale for why it is that these particular incidences do occur when they occur. We also have scenarios at this point in time that are very relevant to the state of Florida. For example, now the state of Florida has reinstituted testing of all associates every 2 weeks. That's a wonderful thing from our perspective because it keeps us controlled, if you will. And in addition to that, there is, in the event that there are particular incidences of exposure to COVID, it is an opportunity to be able to test any residents that might have been exposed during that period of time. That also has occurred. And in that situation, there is the protection of making sure that that additional testing does occur and that residents are given the opportunity to be tested. It has come up that Tuscan Gardens is too extreme with respect to these particular protocols and communications. The only thing that I can say to you is nothing is more important to us than the health, the security, the welfare of our residents. Even one resident in one of our communities or one associate in another one of our communities that is exposed to COVID and because of that test positive is too much for us. And yet the reality is it can happen and has happened. And in both cases, we are fine and everything is contained and we're good. But we can't allow that to be the norm. We've got to allow that to be the rare exception. And so when I talk to you about this, I want to make sure that you recognize that we do this for everyone's protection. We don't know when this is going to be over. We've actually had residents and family members say, when is all this going to be over? And I think we all know the answer. The answer is when there's a treatment and when there's a vaccine. The only problem is we don't know when that's going to happen. Dr. Fauci, for example, indicates that if we have a vaccine at all, he does think it's going to be by early January. That would be a wonderful thing, but you know what? That's January, this is June. We got a ways to go, and we have a ways to go, and we've got to do it together. So in sending this message to you, I want to just simply emphasize that we are here together. We're with you, we're with your residents, we're with your loved ones, and our job is to protect them. We can protect them if we keep them safe at Tuscan Gardens, what we call our sanctuary. What we can't do is keep them safe if they're allowed to, if the residents are allowed to go about shopping and going to restaurants and coming back into the communities. So we don't mean to be extreme, but we do mean to be protective, to protect your loved ones, to protect our residents, to protect the associate, and to protect the community as a whole. I know this is a long time, and I know that you've been at it a long time, but we're going to have to be in it a long time, even more, until we get that vaccine and treatment that will allow us all to breathe a sigh of relief and certainly thank God that we can go on to more normal times. In the meantime, just know how much I appreciate you. I appreciate your patience. I appreciate the associates and the leadership teams in each of the communities that are just simply working day to day, moment to moment, to make sure that everyone stays protected. Thank you so much for listening. I'll look forward to talking to you next time. It'll probably be about 2 weeks or so before we have our next video. So thank you very much, and God bless y'all.